For as long as I can remember, many Mets fans have claimed that the Yankees bought their championships. How did making Juan Soto the highest paid player in league history to give your team a payroll of over $342 million work out? Not even a wildcard team, and 3 separate losing streaks of at least 7 games in the second half of the season. I hope Mets fans who ever believed there's such thing as buying championships understand now it's not that easy even with tons of money to spend. As great of a player as Juan Soto is, he's just one guy. Steve Cohen obviously forgot that pitching wins championships, and not prioritizing that led to the downfall of the 2025 New York Mets. Since Steve Cohen bought the Mets from the Wilpons, who were known to be way too stingy for owning a big market team, Cohen has been known to spend big as the richest owner in baseball. However, he doesn't spend smart. He's better off just writing the checks and marketing the team like an owner is actually supposed to. He needs to be less hands-on with the roster. 2 teams in Major League Baseball history have had a payroll of at least $300 million. Both were owned by Steve Cohen, the 2023 and 2025 Mets. In the 5 years since he's been the majority owner, the Mets have only made the playoffs twice while having a top 2 payroll every single year. I'm not just making this video for the sake of bashing the Mets. The Yankees became a dynasty when George Steinbrenner lost control of team personnel decisions and Gene Stick Michael preached patience instead of spending recklessly. In 2009, yes, the Yankees spent big to get CeCe Sabathia, AJ Burnett, and Mark Teixeira, but they still had the core 4, and Robinson Cano and Melky Cabrera were homegrown too. That team was a very well-constructed team with a great balance of lefties and switch hitters. Jeter and A-Rod were the only 2 pure right-handed hitters in that lineup. It wasn't just the names on paper that won them the World Series. The first offseason with Steve Cohen as the majority owner of the Mets brought them Francisco Lindor, and Lindor actually has worked out well. He was even second in MVP voting last year. The pitcher they brought in with Lindor, Carlos Carrasco, not so much though. The Mets may have won that trade, but also overspent on the often injured James McCann that offseason to be their new catcher on a 4-year, $40.6 million deal. McCann lasted just 2 seasons with the Mets, only played 182 games in those 2 seasons, and wasn't even good when healthy. Even when Cohen spent heavily on pitchers, the pitchers he went all in on were aging stars, so there was no way they would be able to sustain their dominance for much longer at their ages. First, he went all in on Max Scherzer at the age of 37. Scherzer was coming off a great season, but he would only be that great on the Mets for 1 regular season and got absolutely destroyed in the playoffs. Then he signed Justin Verlander a year later while coming off a Cy Young winning season and a World Series championship to a 2-year, $86.7 million deal. But he was 39. Scherzer only lasted a year and a half in Queens. Verlander was injured for the first month of his lone season with the Mets. Verlander actually wasn't bad once he got healthy, but the Mets were struggling, so they ended up trading Verlander back to Houston and Scherzer to the Texas Rangers at the 2023 trade deadline. The Mets had to send the Astros $54 million to complete the Verlander trade and paid around $30 to $35 million of Scherzer's remaining contract after trading him. A lot of money for nothing, which could have easily have been avoided if Steve Cohen was smart with his money. That same year the Mets went all in on Max Scherzer, they signed Starling Marte to a 4-year, $78 million deal, and he made the All-Star game in his first year with the Mets. However, he's just been injury-riddled ever since, having played at least 100 games just once in his 4 seasons with the team. It's not like he never had an injury history either. He's only played at least 140 games twice in his career that dates back to 2012. The same year the Mets signed Verlander, they also signed Kodai Senga from Japan to a 5-year, $75 million contract, and the first year of that was phenomenal. The following year though, he only got to pitch 1 regular season game due to injuries and then got lit up in the playoffs. This year, he started out really well, but then injured his hamstring in June, and by the time he came back, he was so bad he had to be sent down to AAA. 2 more years left on that deal, but so far, only year 1 was really worth it. Who have the Mets actually developed since Steve Cohen became the owner of the team? Nolan McLean looked good in 8 games this year, but let's see with a bigger sample size. Pete Alonso's the only homegrown star the Mets had this year, and he came up while the Wilpons still owned the team. Jeff McNeil was once a homegrown star for the Mets that also came up when the Wilpons still owned the Mets, but he hasn't been able to stay healthy the last 2 seasons. And Brandon Nimmo, another homegrown player who came up before Steve Cohen bought the Mets, he's above average, but nothing more than that. Last offseason, Cohen went all in on Juan Soto, who was coming off a career year with the Yankees. He had a nice season individually with the Mets this year too, but choosing the Mets over the Yankees allowed the Yankees to address their starting pitching by signing Max Fried and get a productive outfield bat who's far more versatile defensively in Cody Bellinger for significantly less money than they would have spent on Soto. The Mets may have still been able to bring back Pete Alonso for $30 million this year, but still did a horrible job addressing their pitching, which was 15th in ERA, 19th in WHIP, and walked the 3rd most batters in Major League Baseball last year. This year, the Mets dropped to 18th in ERA and 23rd in WHIP. Pitching wins championships. It always has, it always will. Their opponent batting average also went up 16 points from last year to this year. All Steve Cohen did to bring in some pitching was bring in Griffin Canning from the Angels on a cheap 1-year deal, Frankie Montas from the Brewers on a 2-year deal, and Clay Holmes from the Yankees on a 3-year deal to go from reliever to starter. None of these pitchers actually made the Mets starting rotation anything anyone would fear, certainly not in the second half of the season, which is when the pitching just completely fell apart, and the bullpen is still a mess. Canning was a reason the Angels pitching staff has been the train wreck that they've been for over a decade, but actually managed to look good in the first month of the season, posting a 2.61 ERA. It didn't take long for him to come back down to earth and then rupture his Achilles tendon in late June. Even before he came back down to earth, he wasn't going deep into games as he only threw at least 90 pitches twice in those 6 starts in the first month of the season. Frankie Montas may have been good in his last year and a half with the Oakland A's, even finished 6th in Cy Young Award voting in his last full season there in 2021. However, since getting traded to the Yankees at the trade deadline the following year, he's been nothing but injury riddled and never had an ERA under 4.55 or a WHIP under 1.256. The Mets still decided it would be such a brilliant idea to sign him for $34 million on a 2-year deal. He pitched so poorly as a starter, he had to be moved down to the bullpen and wasn't so great as a reliever either before needing Tommy John surgery. He won't be able to pitch next year while the Mets still owe him $17 million. What a joke. Clay Holmes also looked good in the first half of the season, but then imploded in the second half. Where have I seen this movie before? That's right, the Yankees made him a closer for the first time in his career in 2022, and he looked unhittable in that role in the first half of the season. Then he just completely fell apart in the second half. He was fine in 2023, but still not a top-tier closer. Last year, he was 1 blown save shy of the most blown saves in a season in MLB history. It became clear that he is not a guy you can use in high-pressure situations, but the Mets still decided to make him a starter this year, something he's never done before. Clay Holmes is a middle reliever. He is not a starter or a closer. I don't know how this wasn't always obvious. David Peterson severely overachieved for a year and a half. Last year, he had a 2.90 ERA, and he made the All-Star game this year with a 3.06 ERA in the first half of the season, all while not throwing very hard, not striking out a lot of batters, and having control issues. He's always been a ground ball pitcher, but once he started having more line drives and less ground balls hit off him, he got exposed in the second half of the season. He had a 6.34 ERA in the whole second half and was especially terrible in the final month of the season with a 9.72 ERA. Sean Manaea was brought in from San Francisco last year on a 2-year deal and had the best season of his career last year. This year though, he was injured until July, which took away some of his velocity, and he had the worst ERA of his career and gave up at least 1 home run in 10 out of the 15 games he pitched in. He also never made it to the end of the 6th inning in any of his 12 starts. The bullpen was just average when looking at their ERA and opponent's batting average. They were also tied with the Rangers and Red Sox for the 4th most blown saves in Major League Baseball. They have a great closer in Edwin Diaz, who had a 1.63 ERA. He only had 31 save opportunities, which he converted 28 of because the Mets were often tied or already losing by the time he entered the game. He, along with Brooks Raley, once he came back from his injury in the second half, and Tyler Rogers, who was acquired at the trade deadline, carried this bullpen just so they wouldn't compete for the absolute worst in Major League Baseball. The bullpen didn't exactly have the most depth out of those 3 guys, but Carlos Mendoza also completely mismanaged the bullpen by using guys in high leverage situations they're not built for, and it's crazy to me that he's being brought back as the manager next year after a season like this. 23 and 26 in 1-run games and 36 blown leads, even when you have a closer as great as Edwin Diaz. Also, that game against the Nationals that went to the 11th inning, even though Tyler Rogers has actually been one of the bright spots in the Mets bullpen still, when Edwin Diaz only throws 7 pitches for the entire 10th inning, you have to bring him back out for the next inning, and I don't know what the thought process was in taking him out of the game and not letting him finish that. Well, maybe the Mets still retaining Carlos Mendoza can make me feel a little bit better about Aaron Boone still being the manager of the Yankees for how many years I've wanted him gone. But anyways, Ryne Stanek was acquired via trade last year and re-signed on a cheap 1-year deal this year when he wasn't even good last year. That's something the Mets ended up settling for after spending so heavily on Juan Soto and wanting to keep Pete Alonso. Part of Mendoza's horrible bullpen management was Stanek finishing second on the Mets in games finished, only for him to convert just 3 out of his 9 save opportunities with a 5.30 ERA. I don't know how he didn't end up getting DFA'd in August when he had an ERA over 12 that month. Sure, he was better in September, but it's not really saying much. Even in previous years where he was any good, he's always had control issues, as he's walked more than 10% of the batters he's faced every year except for 2023, in which his walk rate was just barely under 10%. Next up, Garrett. He came to the Mets 2 years ago, and he's been better the last 2 seasons than any other year he's pitched in the big leagues, but only because he was that bad in Detroit, DC, and Baltimore. His 4.10 ERA and 1.342 WHIP in 2.5 seasons with the Mets sure isn't anything to be proud of. He had 10 save opportunities this year and only converted 3 of them. At the trade deadline, the Mets acquired Ryan Helsley, who wasn't that bad with the Cardinals, but he was never closer material. He may be able to throw over 100 miles per hour and had an ERA of 3 this year before coming to the Mets. However, he also had a WHIP of 139 and already blew 5 saves in St. Louis. He came to Queens to post a 7.20 ERA and blew all 4 of his save opportunities, which came in August, and that was the beginning of the Mets' collapse as they went just 11 and 17 in that month. He wasn't much better in September either. For the Mets' other bullpen arm they acquired at the trade deadline this year, Gregory Soto, he was a roller coaster for the Orioles this year before being traded to the Mets. He is a 2-time All-Star, but that was 3 and 4 years ago. For the Mets, he had a great August, being one of the bright spots of a struggling team, before putting up an ERA of almost 8 in the last month of the season. The only reason I'm surprised Jeremy Hefner got fired as the pitching coach, or how they just fired nearly the entire coaching staff, is that they still retain the main one in charge, Carlos Mendoza. Surely Hefner had to go when the pitching went from somewhat decent in the first half to absolutely terrible in the second half, but Mendoza, the one who's constantly mismanaged the bullpen, is the one who gets to stay.
What?
And I think we have the best chances over here.
Yeah, that's not aging too well right now. Juan Soto himself had a fine season with 43 home runs, which is actually more than last year. He also stole 38 bases while only being in the 13th percentile in sprint speed. Soto also led the National League in on-base percentage, which comes as no surprise since he's always been known for having a great eye. However, his batting average plummeted from 288 last year to 263 as he was striking out more this year, especially in July. With runners in scoring position, he's a career 287 hitter, but this year just 238. Soto also grounded into 7 more double plays than he did last year. It's a lot easier when you get to hit in front of the best hitter since Barry Bonds and Aaron Judge, isn't it? Soto hits in between Francisco Lindor and Pete Alonso for the Mets, and sure, they're solid, but they're obviously not on par with Judge. Alonso was only able to hit 50 plus home runs as a rookie with juiced balls. Aaron Judge doesn't need the balls to be juiced to hit at least 50 home runs in 3 of the last 4 seasons. Judge also hits for average, even with the batting title this year. Alonso not so much, and he doesn't walk nearly as much as Judge either. Lastly, Soto's defense is horrible, and it may not be long before he becomes a career DH. It's a joke that he was a Gold Glove finalist last year, but this year his defense was much worse. He is a reason the Mets finished just 21st in outs above average. He and Pete Alonso, as 2 of the 3 highest paid players on the team, they may have combined for 81 home runs on the season, but also combined for negative 19 outs above average. That's totally not a championship recipe. I hope after this season, Mets fans who claim that the Yankees bought their championships realize it doesn't work like that. Sure, the Yankees having as much money as they do has given them an advantage, I'll acknowledge that, but what did Derek Jeter say a couple years ago? Something I couldn't agree more with?
And let's be clear about one thing. You can't buy a championship. What you can do is you can buy an opportunity to win a championship. You can buy optimism for players. You can buy optimism for a fan base, but ultimately you still got to go on the field and play. And it's difficult to win. That's why you celebrate when you win, because it's difficult to do. So just because you have a high payroll doesn't guarantee a championship.
Steve Cohen has been spending, unlike the Wilpons, and I know you guys were extremely excited for that the day it was announced that the Wilpons were selling the team to a guy who's much more willing to spend. You also have to spend smart, not just a lot. It would be smart for Steve Cohen to just not be involved with team personnel decisions. It almost never goes well in any sport when owners are too involved. Owners should only be there to hire the GM, sign the checks, and take care of the marketing. But you know what? As much as I wanted the Yankees to re-sign Juan Soto, it's fine because the Yankees got to spend the money that they intended to spend on Soto on other areas of need. As a result, at least they made the playoffs, the Mets didn't. That's it for this video. Do you think the Mets will bounce back next year or ever win a World Series with Juan Soto or under Steve Cohen's ownership? Please let me know in the comments. If you enjoyed this video, please consider giving it a like. If you want to see more from me, please consider subscribing and turning on notifications to never miss out. If you're already subscribed, thanks so much for your support as always. And if you're a new subscriber, welcome to the team. Links to my social media are down below for my more immediate reactions to what's going on in the sports world. If you'd like to see my most recent video and the one that YouTube recommends, both are up above. Thank you so much for watching. I'll catch you next time.